Hi, everyone. Welcome to the fourth Author Happy Hour brought to you by the Kentucky Book Festival, a program of Kentucky Humanities. I'm Sarah Woods, the director of the Kentucky Book Festival, and I'm so glad you've joined us this evening. These Author Happy Hours will happen every Thursday at 7 p.m. through the end of October as part of our virtual book festival. You can register in advance online at kyhumanities.org or join us live on Facebook each week. Follow us at KY Humanities on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for updates and announcements. The Kentucky Book Festival will continue next month with programs slated for November 9th through 14th, including such authors as John Grisham, Nikki Finney, and many more. If you're joining us tonight through Zoom and have questions as we move along, please add them to the Q&A box and we'll address them towards the end of the session. We've got 4 special guests with us tonight who are excited to talk about children's books. Jessica Young is the author of the award-winning My Blue is Happy and dozens of other books for young readers, including her latest, A Wish is a Seed. Hi, Jessica.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Carmen Oliver is the author of 2 forthcoming books, along with the picture book series, Bears Make the Best Buddies. She's also the author of the picture book biography, A Voice for the Spirit Bears, How One Boy Inspired Millions to Save a Rare Animal. Hi, Carmen.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Rita Lorraine Hubbard is the author of many nonfiction books for adults, as well as Hammering for Freedom, the story of William Lewis, which was awarded the New Voices Award by Lee and Low Books. Her most recent book is The Oldest Student, How Mary Walker Learned to Read. Hi, Rita.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. And our moderator, Will Hillenbrand, is a celebrated children's book author. His 70th book was recently released called Snow Friends, and he is also an illustrator. Thanks for being here, Will.
I'm happy to be here, Sarah.
I'm going to turn it over to you for y'all to have your talk about children's books.
Thank you, Sarah, and welcome everyone. I'm happy to be here. We're all happy to be here with you and talking about a topic that we love, which is about reading and of course how to share that love. And so to start this off and thinking about the world we're living in and how that works for my panel, I'd like to have them think about how do families read aloud at this time to their children in this age of distraction. And anybody here can kind of jump in to say, well, I have an idea about that.
Well, I have an idea about that.
There you go, Rita, go right for it.
Okay. Yes, it is a very chaotic time right now, but I'm remembering some things I did when my personal life was chaotic, when I was teaching full-time and going to grad school and working a job on the weekend. And what I did for my children, just to bring us together and read, was I always gave them the choice of choosing something new that they were interested in or an old favorite that will bring us all closer together. And that's something that parents can do right now. Your child is probably feeling just as antsy as you are. Do they want something new, something exciting, adventurous, or do they want a cozy old favorite? And also, my sons and I used to listen to audiobooks. So families can do that together. Just sit together, make it short though, because distractions come. We know today there are so many distractions, so make it short, but sit together. You all get to enjoy an audiobook and then discuss it afterwards. So that's what I suggest.
Jessica, you're shaking your head there a little bit. Did you want to jump in and add anything to that?
Oh yeah, I mean, I agree with everything Rita said. I also think I'm a firm believer that picture books in particular, and any book, but picture books are for adults too. I know that people, when we're writing them, we try to make them accessible for children, of course, and young readers, but when I agree that when I feel frazzled, or when when my kids were younger, and I had a lot going on, having the time and the place to read, which was for us before bed, after they had gotten ready for bed, it was a calming time for me as well, because the words in picture books, whether it's supposed to be a lively picture book or whether it's a calming bedtime book, they're arranged so carefully. And I know the other picture book writers here would probably agree with that, but like we spend so much time arranging those words and those ideas, so that people can read them, and it gives you a voice as a parent, and it slows you down as well. So just having that time and place where you say, I'm not going to answer the phone, we have this stack of books and we're going to sit here quietly together. It's helpful for the parent, I think, too, and for the child. And the other thing, as far as having a place, one of the things I did at the beginning of the pandemic, when people were home a lot and schools were starting to be canceled and people were at home, was I put some activities on my website and made a big reading fort and took pictures of it in my daughter's bedroom. So we made this little sign and it said "My Reading Palace." And we took like a little tea thing up there and a basket and some snacks and a whole bunch of stuff. And then I made some printable signs for kids to print "My Reading Cave" or "My Reading Fort" or "My Reading Castle," and just designating some place that's just for them to do that.
Beautiful. And Carmen, what would you have to add to this?
Yeah, those are all, I agree with all of that. I think it's just so important now in this time that we do connect with our families and our children, and reading is probably the most important way to do that. We turn the devices off, we get quiet, we are completely focused. When we sit with our children and read, they know that they have our attention 110%. And it's an opportunity for us to share emotion and talk through the book, not only read the book, but as we go through the pictures, we explore what's happening on the page through the illustrations, and seeing how the illustrator sneaks little fun things into each page. And it's always fun to read with children and see how they pick up on all the as you're turning the pages, and those little clues that an illustrator will drop in. And I just feel that a lot of things that we like to do too is we're constantly adding to our library as well. But a lot of times, in this time when it's financially tough, we can't get as many books as we want. So we reach out to our neighbors and our friends, and we do book swaps. And so they might be purchasing a few new books. Another friend might be purchasing some books, and then we get together, put them in plastic bags, swap them, and at a park. And that's another way too, where you can be sharing different kinds of books that your kids may not have chosen yourself, but somebody else may have chosen. And we like to do a lot of nonfiction as well. So we like to read magazines and as well as picture books. So I like keeping a lot of variety of materials around for us during this time. And it's really important. I think it's fun we read every night before we go to bed. My kids are older now as well, but there's still, a quiet time for us to read. And there's nothing better than parents modeling reading on their own as well. So my husband and I have constantly got a book on the go or two. And I think those kinds of good habits are really important now more than ever.
Well, I love the contribution each one of you made. It's so distinct and individual to yourself, and also Carmen, like with reaching that out into the community. You're building a reading community right there, and I think that's wonderful. I think parents should know that no one can replace their voice. Yeah. And when you give voice to a story, you're also giving your total attention to that child. And maybe that child has never said that, but what they've really always wanted is all of your attention. And you're going to do that through an adventure. And you don't have to make it up. You can read it. It's on a page. You don't have to be A.A. Milne. You just have to deliver A.A. Milne. So, pre-read and being able to do that. I'm going to make a segue here and talk a little bit about some things that are all connected. We're all writers, but the first book I'd like to talk about by one of our panelists. This is Rita's book, and it's The Oldest Student, and how Mary Walker learned to read. Now, you know, congratulations, of course. I'm going to say this to each one of you, but this is an amazing story.
Thank you.
And Mary was a slave.
Yes.
And early in her life, I mean, no one, you know, 12 years old or 100 and, you know, no one, you know, being a slave is not a, you know, that's a sadness. It's the absence of freedom. But she found that there was something else that was important to her, which is another freedom.
Yes.
Freedom that I mean, that this story just is, you know, she could have, when she was 100 and plus, thought, what else do I need to do? But she knew she had another freedom, didn't she?
She did. And let me say this at the beginning of the book. Well, first, let me say this before I say that. I did find an interview that she did with someone, and I was given the transcripts. And one of the things she said was that as an 8-year-old, her idea of freedom was the birds, because nothing held them down. They could go where they wanted. Yeah. And in the end, she got that freedom twice. She got it when she got a chance to ride in an airplane, and she was not bound by gravity, but she got it in her spirit, because the ability to read gives you that freedom. Gravity of any kind does not hold you down. You can go backwards, you can go forward, you can go to another planet, go wherever you want. You're as free as a bird when you can read. And that's what she said. And so that's what I wanted to convey in the book.
Did freedom to become the person she was intended to be.
Yes.
And the importance for everyone listening tonight is knowing that reading isn't easy. She could have chosen not to do it. She did the hard thing. And through that hard thing, she found freedom. And that book is an inspiration.
Thank you so much.
As her life is, and your work in making it, it's beautiful.
Thank you.
I'd like to switch to another area of reading, and that, I'm going to talk about Jessica Young's book, A Wish is a Seed. And here, another aspect of reading and the adventure and through the writing, A Wish is a Seed is really about hope and also trust in something beyond what you see right in front of you and how that evolves. But Jessica, you know all about this, and this is connected to you as a reader and as a writer. And why don't you tell us a little bit about what happens here? It's connected to reading.
Yeah, so I guess you're exactly right. It's a book about hope. It's a book about the power of something small to grow into something big. And I think for kids, like as Rita was saying, the imagination is such a powerful, powerful thing. And we all have it, and children have it and are so attuned to it. And so if we can, through reading, have them empathize with other characters, put themselves in other characters' shoes, if we can have them think about possibility instead of what is. And I think, to me, we need problem solvers. We need people who are going to grow into people who solve a lot of, difficult problems. And I think that part of creativity and critical thinking is imagination and being able to see that there may be other ways and other things, as you said, besides what's right in front of you. And just like a seed is so tiny, but can grow into a humongous oak tree, I would hope that kids could extrapolate on some level that they too may feel powerless, or they may feel like they don't have a lot of impact in their world, but that they can, and that they're very powerful.
I think that's beautifully said. And I think that children, live in the land of giants. That's from Sindak, because we're the giants and they're not. And part of that can be whether they're empowered or not, and they're becoming in that. And now to make a segue to Carmen's book, Bears Make the Best Riding Buddies. And in here, the power that books give us when we're read to translates to the words that we gather that we put together so that we can tell our story or our experience, something that's compelling to us. And unless we have the words, that's bottled up. But here, well, you know, what better to have than a bear to help you with that. But Carmen, you can tell us all about that. So go right ahead.
Yeah, this has been just a joy to create this series. It actually, the inspiration for this book, I think the foundation was laid by my own grandmother, who instilled, and my mother, a love of reading. I still have the book that my grandmother read to me every night. It's old, as you can see, and it's, you know, the pages are starting to fall out a little bit. But she would read this to me every night, and she really, you know, was instrumental in teaching me how to read, because I never got tired of her reading, and she never got tired of reading to me. And so when the story for the first book in the series was Bears Make the Best Reading Buddies. And I was working on a completely different kind of book. I was doing research on a nonfiction book on the voice for the spirit bears, on what spirit bears are. And I ended up, at the same time, my fifth grader was going to become a reading buddy. And the teacher, of course, assigns, you know, kindergartners to the fifth graders for reading buddies. And I thought to myself, well, what would happen if the kindergartner didn't want the assigned reading buddy? What if she brought her own reading buddy to school? And that was kind of the inspiration of how the idea came together for the first book. And then, you know, one of the things that I tell readers all the time is that their voice is so important, and that every one of them have a very unique story to tell. And so I wanted to convey that with Writing Buddies, that their voices are unique, that every one of them will tell a different story, the way the voice they choose, how they put the words together, the emotion they convey. And, you know, and I wanted to take Adelaide and Bear on another journey for young readers, to show them how easy it is for them to just write their own story and tell their own story. And so that's where that book kind of came from afterwards. It was wanting to continue those characters in an encouraging way, showing young readers that, you know, that these two characters always have their back, and giving them additional ideas to let them explore their voice and let them know how powerful their voice really is in the world.
I had an author that I did a book, my first book with, Verna Artemis, said, writers are bookworms that hatched. And I think each one of you touched on an aspect of that. And so I'd like to continue this round of ideas, and that is that with parents and their unique role, and when we go to school, we have to read, but at home we can be introduced to the pleasure of reading and the pleasure of books. You know, we have an association, maybe the Rorschach test is for, if you say the word books, it would be hit the books. You wouldn't necessarily say the pleasure of books. But I think what we're talking about tonight is what we can do to bring the pleasure of story and the pleasure of books to that. And if each one of you could talk about maybe an experience that you had, or for instance, that was like, Rita, when we go with you, do you have anything that you can add to that?
Well, actually I do. I'm remembering again when my two sons were very young, and education was very important. But for me, I watched them as they read the different books that I gave to them, and they both loved to laugh so much. And they were looking for funny. That's what they were looking for. And they didn't always get it in their classes, because of course teachers have such a humongous roster that they have to check mark. I did this and I did this, but I could do it. So I began to look for funny books, and I found one called The Laugh Book. And the reason I remember this, my children were teens, and they're not teens now, they're grown and they're married, and one has a child. But when they were in their teens, I remember them sort of being territorial over The Laugh Book. They wanted to, each one of them really wanted to own it. It was a family book, but they wanted to own the book. so that it could go in their room on their bookshelf. But anyway, what I found from that experience was children love to laugh just as much as we do, and they love the pleasure of discovering something unexpected that makes them laugh or something that makes them think. And so for me, as a parent, I always tried to give them that freedom. You tell me what it is that you love. Let's set it up. Let's talk about it. What do you love? What do you like to do? And at that time, we went to the bookstore or the library. I understand we're in a pandemic now, but I just gave them free rein to go into the bookstore and browse among the books. That was a pleasure by itself. Yeah. And find what they loved. And they always loved funny. But anyway, that's my contribution to this.
Thank you. Jessica, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, actually, Rita and I were talking the other day about this a little bit. And we were talking about just following your child and having the child lead. And just like anything else, I'm a little bit of a control freak myself. I think people would agree with me, and not imposing, kind of your likes and wants and the things that you're good at or want to do on your child. And so I remember when my son was, I don't know, he's probably 2 or 3. And he had a couple books and they were all about vehicles. And I have no interest in vehicles. I don't care about cars as long as they run. That's pretty much all I care about. But he knew every model and make of car since he was tiny and would point them out when we went by. And I remember when and to me, the books were not, they were boring to me, but he loved them and he would want to read them over and over and over. And I remember when he taught me what an articulated bus was, because I had no idea. In his little tiny voice, we were driving and he went, "Articulated bus," and pointed out the window. And I was like, what? How did you know this? And he'd read it in a book. So I think I totally agree that at home and at school sometimes too, it's great to be able to choose. And funny is great too. Other formats are great. Like when I talk to kids for school visits, I did A Wish is a Seed, and it's a very lyrical, quiet picture book. But I also do this Haggis and Tank, and it's a graphic novel. And it's totally goofy. And so you can take one voice and let the child be the other voice. And if they already can read, or you could give them sound effects. And every time the werewolf howls, you could point at them and they howl like the werewolf. But, I think we also like different, or I know I do, different types of books too. So just following your child.
Carmen,
yeah.
Go ahead and add.
Yeah,
add
I agree. We do all of those things as well. And one of the things my kids that I did with them was they got their own library card, and it was really, really special. And it was, they saw mom having lots of cards and and this was their first card that they were able to put into their wallets, and it was their license to go to the library and get to choose the books that they wanted to choose. And so we obviously have, and you can see the books behind me, we have a nice home library, but trying to find the right book for each of your children. My kids were all very different readers. I have 2 that are close together, 1.5 years apart, and then one that is 8 to 10 years older. And so it was really important, like listening to them and knowing their personalities and letting them, and having a variety of different materials. What my daughter read, my son didn't read. And what my son read, one of my daughters didn't read. And so it was really important for me to listen to each of their personalities. We started off with my son, a lot of the young, fun magazines like National Geographic Kids magazine. He was really into nonfiction and snakes and sharks. And so he couldn't, obviously at a young age, read that entire magazine, but we could share snippets from it, and it would come every month, and he would get excited to go to the mail when we knew that there was going to be a new magazine coming for him. And he needed more white space and more pictures, and so same thing, humor and joke books. And so trying to until we got him to a stage where he was ready to start chapter books, and we started with early readers and finding the ones that would make him laugh or that were a bit absurd or exaggerated, and then my daughter was a very different kind of reader too. She was a little bit she needed something that was more, had warmth to it and emotion to it and friendship and family oriented. And so, and we had moved, you know, from Canada to the United States. And I know one of the books that she really latched onto when she was young was Bird's book, which was, I think it was like Pickle Juice on a Cookie was the first one. And it was about a little girl like having to deal with, you know, moving and change. And so yeah, I think it's really important to try and really, you know, listen to your young readers and let them have some choices. A good friend of mine, Kwame Alexander, always says sometimes you got to let the kids choose the ride. And so, you know, I've always tried to kind of follow that philosophy as well. I had parents that allowed us to choose our own books too, and so I tried to carry that forward as well.
I think each one of you made a similar point, which is listening to your reader, listening to them, so that this becomes not just a monologue, it's a dialogue. And when you listen to them, you can really inform what is. I mean, another metaphor. We're in the, you know, the bluegrass states, so bluegrass music, but nobody picks out our favorite piece of music. And we never get tired of our favorite piece of music. And it can be the same for our favorite book. We don't get tired of that book. We can hear it again and again. And if we're listening to that response as an adult, we can see how that's painting a picture of that individual. And that's, again, what all of you said. I'm going to switch to a slightly different step here, which is experiencing experiences. And books allow us to experience experiences. Like, for instance, how do we get to the 100-acre woods? Well, there's only one place, only one ticket to get there. It's through the pages of a book. And how do we get those experiences? You've talked about before, it's a time to listen. For a child, it's a time to listen to a story. It's a time to escape the here and now. That can be especially important now. And it can also allow, and this connects to each one of your books, but it can allow your imagination to soar, whether it's a seed or a bear or birds. I mean, there's a direct connection right there. But if you can talk a little bit about, you know, that free-flying aspect of when you're reading with them, that you're also, you know, again, I'm going to start with Rita. I'll put you on the spot again, but okay. It's free-flying time again, so.
Yes. Yes, so I'm sorry, can you repeat that? What is your question?
Well, I mean, if you can talk a little bit about how that, you know, like when you're reading to your family, how that gave them wings to hear what they wanted to hear, to grow in and allow reading to them wasn't about getting an SAT test.
Right.
It was about the relationship and that you provided, which was really, I think I'll just call it free flying. And that might be confusing, but I'll stick with it.
Okay. Well, we started very, very young. And what I mean by that, when my children were really a few months old, probably before that, I started to read to them, show them pictures. Like one of the panelists said, the pictures are so important because they help spur the imagination on. So we started doing that. We started reading when they were younger. And what I began to notice, the freedom that I began to notice came with their imagination. I'm going to give a specific example. Frog and Toad Are Friends, that series.
Yeah.
My oldest son absolutely adored that series, and I got every single one of those books for him. My other son could read it too. I would read it to them when they were too young to read, but when he got a little bit older and he could read it, one day he came to me and said, "I'm scared to go to bed." And I asked him why, and he said, because one of them, I can't remember if it was Frog or Toad, had a bad dream. And that it let me know that he was absorbing, his imagination was taking over, and he was really being set free. So of course I worked with him on that, but I made sure to provide them many, many more books of all different kinds. And by the way, I will say I am a reviewer for several trade publishers across the US. So I've always been supplied a wide variety of books. That includes Sports Illustrated for kids and National Geographic, funny books, puzzle books, all sorts of books. So what I did was I used to sit with my children, and like one of the other panelists said, I would let them choose. We took turns who was going to be first choosing, but I would let them choose a book, and that book belonged to them. They had a special space on the bookshelf for that book, and we also had a quiet time in my house. That was for me. It wasn't really it wasn't for them. It's for me because so much was going on in my life as far as teaching and going to grad school. We had quiet time, and it was always unexpected, but my children loved it. I would just blow a little whistle and say, quiet time. And they would just jump up. They'd be so happy. They'd do this. They'd run and get the book of their choice. And I used a timer, and you'll notice I've got an egg timer here, but I used a timer. And your quiet time lasted as long as that timer. And there, I could see them reading, and I could see their imaginations soaring, as you said. And sometimes when the bell rang and quiet time was over, they didn't want it to be over. The time was for me. And after the bell rang, they could ask me whatever, we could do whatever, but sometimes they didn't want it to be over. They would say, will you reset it? I noticed that when they were children. So that's the way that I let my children fly free. It was really a wide assortment of books. And like someone else said, following the child, knowing what they want to do, and teaching them how special it can be to have a little bit of personal time to read whatever you want. Yeah. That's the way I did it. Yeah.
Jessica, it's getting dark out there behind you, so.
No, sorry, I'll try to move my lights in.
No, you're fine. You're looking good. Tell us a little bit about that. Maybe, growing a beautiful mind is what I was kind of hearing what Rita was talking about.
Yeah, I think, I was an art teacher for a long time, and people would always ask me, like, what do you do for your kids to teach them art? Do you take them to museums, which is great, or do you directly instruct them? And really for my own kids, and this is, I'm bringing back around to reading, but I would say I just give them the materials and the space and the time to do it. And I think that reading is the same way, like Rita was saying. I mean, to allow them to choose and then have that structure of the time. They may, sometimes say that they don't like it, but I think kids in general do like structure and they like routine, and it's reassuring to them. So especially right now, establishing that and making it fun and giving them choice, and then just kind of stepping back. The other thing, Rita and I were talking the other day about like engaging them in different ways. So looking for particular books, like if you have a really young child, there are a lot of interactive books out there that prompt the child and kind of can help you get them involved in the book. So like, I have mine here just because it's mine, but there are many other examples, but this one's called Play This Book, and it has instruments, and it teaches kids the sort of the motions that they can do to play the instruments. And it's rhyming. Other books, I was thinking, like there's a cymbal one, you can crash, 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 and have them do the sound effects, but also rhyming books, like you can kind of engage them in rhyme a little bit and anticipatory rhyme. So if there's a page turn and then the rhyme is after the page turn, you can pause, or even just pause if there is no page turn, and let them complete the rhyme because they know what it is and they may have read the book before. So just kind of giving them the time and space to do that. And I think with my own kids, what I noticed is that like Rita, they would just want to keep doing it. We didn't set a timer, but it would get longer and longer, the span of time that they would fill. And then also they would start making new stories for the characters. And I think probably you guys have had this too, where kids write to you, who read your books and say, oh, I thought of this great story for Finley. I play soccer. Could you do a soccer book? And they'll say, I started writing this. Or, for Haggis and Tank, I had one child on a school visit say, do they have a theme song? And I said, no, they don't have a theme song. So he's like, I wrote one for them. I wrote them a theme song. So I think we can't even predict, how creative they can be if we give them the time and space to do so.
I totally agree. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, with my kids too, I feel like, they just get to explore different places they've never been before through books. You know, we grew up, you know, in the city. So, you know, when you share books with growing up on a farm or reading to them from Charlotte's Web, you know, they're transported to a completely different place. You know, when we read some of C.S. Lewis, they're in a fantasy world and they can escape through a wardrobe, you know. And when, you know, I read A Voice to the Spirit Bearers to them, which I wrote, you know, they learn about this wild creature that's so rare, that's so place in the world that it's found, and how a young boy wanted to make sure he could do everything he could to use his own voice to overcome his own stuttering problem and to try and find a way to be a voice for these bears that didn't have a voice for themselves. And so kids learn so much through these stories that we read to them. And I just, you know, there's just, it's endless. And I think the earlier they realize that stories will take them wherever they want to go, they'll also start creating their own stories, using their own imagination, like Jessica said, you know, coming up with ideas for their own books. Even when I go into schools and we've done, you know, one of the Bears Buddies books, the kids will often start their own stories that, you know, frogs make the best buddies, and, you know, snakes make the best buddies, and they have ideas, and why chicken makes the best reading buddies, because, you know, a chicken can find its way to the end of the story faster, or an octopus has more arms so it can read more books, so that's why it's the best reading buddy. So it's really fun to see, you know, when with kids, you know, they have the imagination. We just need to sprinkle in the seeds, and that comes with us, you know, by reading a variety of different books and showing them the magic of the world that's beyond their back door, you know, that they may not have the privilege of seeing, but knowing that it's out there.
Pausing and talking about a page or a part or a chapter in just conversation can help grow that beautiful mind. It's through art, it's beauty, it's cultural literacy, it's visual literacy, it's nurturing a sense of aesthetics and the sense of taste by being able to do that. Does reading aloud ever get old? I mean, is there time to stop reading aloud, or is it from the nursery to the nursing home? Should we just keep it going? I'll start with Carmen. What do you think?
Yeah, totally. I'd never get tired of hearing somebody read aloud, even at my age. I love hearing poetry read aloud. I love being able to go to a conference and listen to authors read from their work, whether it's novels. Our children still love to be read a story. Storytelling in the traditional sense has been going on for generation to generation. It keeps getting passed on. And again, it's a time of connection when we come together to hear a story read aloud. You know, it's a time to connect, and we get quiet and we listen and we reflect as well.
Jessica, what do you have for that?
Yeah, I was feeling sad because my kids are teenagers and we don't read aloud to each other anymore, but I do have friends who do with their teenagers the same age as mine, and they still pile into, you know, a sofa or into bed together and read together, and I love that. What we do now is sometimes the best feeling is to read together, like parallel play. So we're both, you know, we have our own books and we're sitting in the same room and we have a snack, or we have a, you know, warm cider or whatever it is. And it's just experiencing that time together in that room, but then also sort of knowing that we're each somewhere in our own book world, you know, in our imagination. But it does feel like together time still. So I love the idea of continuing to do that. And even when I go to conferences, you just reminded me, I have a friend, Susan Eady, who's an author illustrator here in Nashville. And I think she is the best read aloud person ever. So when she is at a conference and she reads first pages, or, I mean, it could be anything. She could read the conference brochure. I just feel like I just want to do crisscross applesauce and just, you know, curl up and listen to her. You know what I'm talking about, Rita?
I do.
Yeah.
She's wonderful, isn't
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that, you know, that part of sometimes when a parent conference is happening and a child's in second grade and they can say, oh, you know, little Jimmy is reading really well on his own, and a parent can think, well, you know, and the teacher might be saying they should be doing more independent reading. That's all wonderful, but it doesn't mean, oh, now I get my Miller time back, or I get, you know, some of my other time back. Just go ahead and keep reading. See, Sarah just popped on. I just wanted to wrap up a couple thoughts here, and that is being able to say thank you to all the panelists. You know, we could go on further. Your input is so rich and powerful. I do have some books here. There are many books that are available for anyone that's interested, that would like to go deeper into books, whether it's Megan Lambert or Mem Fox. You know, check that out so that you can see what those perspectives are. It all starts with a book, a voice, and a place to sit. And now back to Sarah.
Thank you so much. We do have some questions. We still have some more time from our viewers. Veronica asks, what books would you recommend for a 4 or 5-year-old? And hopefully Veronica's ready to take some notes. That's a very specific question, if you have any off the top of your head.
Well, you know, if you don't mind, I'll go ahead and jump in.
Yeah,
I think that one of the important things is that if you have a librarian that you know, or if you go to bookstores, going to story hours, and being able to make a reading routine beyond what you might be doing, to make those extensions. And then along those lines, if you have a bookseller that you can say, you know, I have this. Teachers, librarians may have that. You may need to have many sources, or probably like in Carmen's neighborhood, they're just going to ask each other, right? They're just going to say, well, what do you have in that bag?
Yeah, definitely.
I think oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead, Jessica.
No, I was just going to say, we also have a community library. Does anybody have the little libraries in their community too? So we're constantly sharing books through that as well.
I think too, it really depends on the 4 or 5-year-old. Like, that's what I was gonna say. Like, with both of my own kids, like, I had one child who was reading, we would laugh because she could pick up a middle grade and sit there and just read it out loud to us. I don't think she understood what she was reading, but she could perfectly read it and pronounce it like mechanically. But then, you know, another child might gravitate towards something else. So I would say to look at different formats would be, and just kind of see where that child is. Because again, you could try like a really interactive book. There's one called Press Here, and Hervé Tillet has like a whole bunch of different ones. There's one called Tap the Magic Tree. Those all are asking kids to manipulate the book and do things to the book in like a response in a physical way. But then some kids, I've had kids really young who were already starting to read, who would do something like this in a graphic novel format. And there's even one that's younger. This one, Scholastic, has a lot of these. And so sometimes kids, you know, can gravitate towards different formats. So I would say try a bunch of different things.
And if you still have your pencil ready, you could write this down. The Jim Trelease has a read aloud handbook. It's in its 8th edition. And, you know, you may have a viewer here being able to say, I don't want to miss something. And so the Read Aloud Handbook really isn't the list of all the best books, but they have it's a really great list of read aloud books, and it covers all kinds of genres. So the reason it's in the 8th edition is the new books continue to be added to it, but the good ones that are hanging in there are still going to be there. So there's a ready-made source, and so Jim Trelease Read Aloud Handbook, and Cindy Gorgeous is the person who's most recently updated that.
May I add something too, please? I read just a delightful children's book or picture book I think it was for ages pre-K through 1, if I'm not mistaken, and it is called How to Spot an Artist. And children in that age are at that expressive stage where they like to draw and scribble. And this book is just wonderful because it helps them identify themselves as an artist, but it also helps them to become aware of people, the people around them, what they do. They learn what an artist might wear and where an artist might draw. And some of the pictures the artist was drawing on the wall. That reminds me of little kids. And the things people might say to artists, like, why are you drawing that? Or what is that? But of course, the artist knows what it is. It's a wonderful book. I laughed all the way through. It's called How to Spot an Artist, but I can't think of the name of the person right now, the author. But I enjoyed it. I believe the children will enjoy it too.
Good. Yeah, that's when I'll read with my nephews. They both love to read. Will has met one or both of them, I think, at the last year's book fair. We have another question from a viewer named Lori. She says, I work in an elementary school and I'm finding that my students cannot seem to leave the video games. What are your thoughts about getting kids to put down video games and pick up a book?
Anyone?
Go ahead.
May I jump in? Okay, now the children I'm thinking of, I think I told this panel that I taught for about 20 years. The children I'm thinking of were a little bit older than what you've mentioned, but what we did was I called it setting it up. I set up a book. Like I wanted to read the classics to them, and I knew they weren't going to be interested if I said that. So I set it up. I was going to read like Black Beauty. And I started out by saying, who's ever seen a horse close up, a real life horse? What do you think horses think about all day long? Or have you ever ridden a horse? And we talked about it and talked about it. And finally I said, I found a book and I want to tell you, we're going to read it together and I'm going to tell you what horses think about all day long or what horses do. And we would read the book. I read it to them. Now, we had some times that they read, but I mean, this was a session where I read to them. They just listened. I could have played a video. I could have done the movie, but I didn't want to do that because I wanted them first to form the images in their heads. I wanted them to form what they thought the story was. We read the whole book, and then I said, you know what? I found the video. Do you all want to see the video? And they said yes. And I'll never forget when I played the video, these children, and they were all like high interest, low vocabulary. They would say things like, I remember that part. Or they would say, wait a minute, that didn't happen there. That happened the next time. But that's how we did it. I called it setting them up first. I set the book up. We talked about it for a little while, and then the book was a surprise for them. And after that, I gave them the reward of the video. And we went from there.
I think that part of this whole business about being able to say, how, you know, computer this or time this or whatever it might be, you know, books are really, you know, the relationship there means that it's going to take the commitment, as Rita was talking about, is being able to pre-read the book, know what it is, and get into the voice and be the voice. Now, you know, so if you say, you know, I have a learning disability. So as an adult, I could say, oh, that's not me. I'm not going to be able to do that. But then this is my only time to be able to do this. I mean, you know me, I'll figure this out. And part of it is being able to, you know, when you pre-read, you can start figuring out those voices, you can have fun with it. And so part of this is kind of like the video games, that's fine. You know, there's a place for that. But if it's like our diet and you say, well, I'm only going to binge on junk food, you know, it's not going to end up serving you very well for the long haul. And so all the things we've talked about, building imagination or thinking about what could happen when you turn that page, then, you know, that's pretty much robbed from you. And if you feel like I am not a good reader, well, then maybe like Rita talked about earlier, those audiobooks can be the part of the things that you feed in. It's never been an easier time to be able to borrow them and to be able to get them and bring them into your inventory. You can also be a part of that child's life as a reader. And you can revisit the things maybe, you know, or for what their generation is, you know, for my generation, maybe it was A Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, but a little earlier than that for me. But every generation wants something new for them, whether it's, you know, whether it's the Chronicles of Narnia or if it's Harry Potter. And Jim Dale does a great job reading that. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, you bring up a really good point too, Will. And I think Rita, like I think sometimes too, like with reading the story to them, then there's so many activities that can extend the book into the classroom with the students. And so doing maybe like a fun reader's theater and getting into small groups and letting the kids like perform the book, you know, and everybody gets to play a role and have a part and play a different character. And then you can move the small groups around so that everybody gets a chance to play the favorite character, you know, is also fun. And there's a lot of activities. Most authors now and illustrators will have activity guides that are on their websites that offer a plethora of different kinds of activities that can be done in the classroom that a lot of children, which are games in itself, not on the screen per se, but different kinds of games that they can do with the book that the author or an educator consultant has created to accompany the book. So those are often another way to kind of engage, you know, the kids in the classroom as well.
I'm so glad you said that. That was exactly what I was going to say, is that I feel like most authors have either parent or teacher resources or even videos. I have a bunch of videos on my website that demonstrate different crafts to go with the books. Everybody has their own flavor with how they do it, but I think there are different ways that you can have the kids extend it, like you say, and make it more interactive. And I also feel like what Will was saying about the relationship aspect, that child gets immediate feedback from a video game, and I've seen them, like I know, you know, I don't play them, but I see how that they do something and then boom, they get a point or something happens and they're getting feedback all the time. I feel like the most important feedback though is relational feedback from us and from their peers. And so if we can make that book in whatever way, asking them questions or having them take a character and read part of it, whatever way you can engage with that is so much more valuable and means so much more to them than that kind of candy type of feedback that, you know, like you said, that's not nutritional, that doesn't last.
Yeah, thank you.
And you can also bring all of us into your classrooms too, because all of us love to come and speak like we are here today with the festival. We all love, you know, dropping by Zoom, Skype, Google Meets, you know, and saying hi. And that's always fun for the kids to actually meet the author, meet the illustrator too.
Yeah, it's always fun to hear the questions that come up when you visit with kids and allow them to ask questions. Sometimes it's more of an anecdote when they raise their hand than a question, but then you get to tell them the difference between a question and a story. Yeah, so I think that's about our time. I want to thank you all so much for being here. I can't wait to give your books as Christmas gifts to my nieces and nephews. They know every year that's all they get. So thank you so much for your work and for being here tonight and sharing about it, and just good luck with your upcoming books. I can't wait to see more.
Thank you
to
so
my
much.
panel, I
Thank
think that
you.
you guys all, you know, did a beautiful job. Thanks for making my job so easy.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
And thank you for watching our program tonight. We're so glad that you joined us. One exciting program that Kentucky Humanities does that kind of ties in with this is Primetime Family Reading Time. And if you would like to learn more about that program, visit us at kyhumanities.org. Primetime is a really cool program where you can bring a storyteller and a scholar into a library or a school or other community center and bring parents in to learn how to read and connect with their children. So learn more at kyhumanities.org. Our virtual book festival will continue, as I mentioned, through November. You can find everything you need to know on kyhumanities.org and sign up for our newsletter. We send out an email about once a week with info about the book festival and upcoming events. Make sure you follow us as well at KY Humanities on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you've participated through Zoom and you close out the session tonight, you'll see a survey appear on your screen. It's 5 questions, and we'd really appreciate if you'd fill that out to give us feedback about this event. Next week at 7 p.m. on Thursday, we will have another author happy hour about writing for teens and tweens with Mariama Lockington, Greg Howard, Jason Lady, and Ismail Williams in conversation with Molly McCaffrey. I hope to see you next Thursday.